the sinking in 1945, is still considered one of the greatest tragedies in U.S. naval history.
What if I told you a Nazi submarine lost for nearly 80 years was hiding a secret no one was ever supposed to find? Buried deep off the U.S. coast, divers uncovered a sealed chamber that hadn't been touched since World War II, and what they found inside could rewrite history. Personal belongings perfectly preserved, encrypted codebooks, even clues suggesting a secret mission on American soil. But that's just the beginning. You're about to witness a mystery that's been buried in silence for decades. Stay with us, because the truth will leave you speechless. In 1991, a group of seasoned civilian divers plunged into the cold waters off New Jersey, expecting just another routine dive over an unnamed wreck. But what they discovered would unravel decades of historical certainty and spark one of the most gripping maritime mysteries ever unearthed. It wasn't just a sunken vessel. It was a ghost from a war long past, resting silently where no one thought it could be. Beneath layers of sediment and fishing nets lay a submarine that history had supposedly already buried. This wasn't just a wreck. It was a secret, one that would whisper questions louder than any official wartime report ever had. During World War II, the Atlantic Ocean was a deadly chessboard. Beneath its surface, German U-boats prowled like predators, invisible and deadly. These steel beasts cut supply lines with chilling precision, sending thousands of Allied vessels to the ocean floor. One such hunter was U-869, a Type IXC-40 submarine launched in 1943, equipped for long-range attacks and deadly silence. With 6 torpedo tubes and nearly 250 feet in length, it was engineered to vanish into the deep after unleashing destruction. Helmed by Captain Helmut Neuerberg, U-869 set out on its first combat patrol in late 1944, with its destination listed as the Gibraltar region, a critical naval choke point. But the fog of war was thick. Germany's command structure was collapsing, orders were scrambled, and communication was chaotic. Somewhere along the way, something went wrong, or changed entirely. On February 11, 1945, Allied forces believed they had engaged and sunk a German U-boat near Gibraltar. Reports were filed. The kill was confirmed. The sub was identified as U-869. Case closed. Or so they thought. For nearly half a century, that version of the story went unchallenged. The sub's 56-man crew were presumed lost, entombed in silence and cold steel. No one asked questions, until a series of unsettling details started to emerge. First, there was no physical evidence of U-869 near Gibraltar. No sonar images, no wreckage. Nothing tangible to match the supposed kill. Second, wartime reports, often based on rushed visual sightings or assumptions under duress, were known to be riddled with errors. Could the Allies have sunk the wrong sub? Or worse, none at all? Most troubling was the absence of German records pinpointing U-869's final location. As Germany's military infrastructure crumbled in 1945, communication failed. Logs were destroyed or never completed. The last confirmed message from U-869 came when it was still in the North Atlantic, far from the waters near Gibraltar. Then came silence. No further signals. Just a void, as if the ocean had claimed the vessel without a trace. It was this silence that haunted researchers. Historians stuck to the original report, insisting the sub had met its end near Gibraltar. But for families of the crew, the lack of closure was a wound that never fully healed. No wreck, no grave, just a name carved into stone, and a mystery left to drift with time. Then, off the coast of New Jersey, something unexpected appeared. It was summer 1991, and divers John Chatterton and Richie Kohler, both veterans of the deep, were scanning the ocean floor using side-scan sonar. The area was treacherous. Strong currents, low visibility, and steep technical challenges meant only the most skilled attempted these dives. But what their sonar captured that day changed everything. A torpedo-shaped object lying still at a depth of 230 feet, roughly 60 miles from Point Pleasant. Man-made, a submarine, but not just any sub, one that wasn't supposed to be there. Their curiosity turned into a full-blown obsession. On their first dive, the conditions were brutal. Frigid temperatures pierced their suits, and the water's murky haze offered little visibility. The structure was half buried in sand, wrapped in nets and time. There were no markings, no plaques, nothing to say what ship this was. But it was clearly a submarine, and a massive one at that. The conning tower had collapsed. The hull showed signs of implosion, and decades of corrosion had taken their toll. The mystery only deepened. What if the ocean had been hiding one of history's greatest misplacements? No World War II sub was officially lost in that region. So what was this? And how had it avoided detection for so long? The divers dubbed it Yohu, a ghost without an identity. As they returned for further dives, risking everything on each descent, clues began to surface. German instrumentation, pressure gauges in metric, fittings and valves unlike any American design. They were slowly unraveling the truth. It was a German U-boat. That much was clear. But which one? This wasn't just underwater exploration. It was a full-blown detective story at 230 feet below sea level. Each dive brought new artifacts, plates, valves, mechanical components, each hinting at the vessel's origins. And as the evidence mounted, the pieces started pointing toward an impossible truth. The submarine might be U-869. But how could a sub declared destroyed near Gibraltar end up silently decomposing off the coast of New Jersey? That question would become the core of the mystery, and the driving force behind a global hunt for answers. The ocean had held this secret for nearly 50 years. A submarine misplaced by history, sealed away by miscommunication and the fog of war. What began as a routine dive had now become a race to rewrite the past. And as the divers went deeper, both into the wreck and into the mystery, the silence of U-869 was finally beginning to speak. It all started with fragments and rumors, scattered pieces of a long-forgotten enigma rusting quietly beneath the waves. Divers stumbled across the wreck, unsure of what they had found. The first signs were vague, some artifacts, markings barely visible, whispers from the past embedded in corroded metal. Then came the turning point, a discovery both mundane and groundbreaking. A tarnished butter knife, its surface dulled by time, yet still bearing the unmistakable engraving of a name, Hornberg. Not a serial number or equipment code, but a man's name. That knife cracked the mystery wide open. It wasn't just a clue. It was a breadcrumb left behind by history itself. The name matched a real crew member, Georg Hornberg, documented in naval records as having served aboard the German submarine U-869. Suddenly, this wasn't just a wreck, it was a time capsule. The divers, now fueled by obsession rather than curiosity, dove deeper, both into the ocean and the archives. They traced engine components, diesel manifolds, and part numbers back to the shipbuilders at WWII-era, confirming the submarine's identity piece by piece. In 1997, after 6 relentless years of grueling dives and sleepless nights sifting through records, their work forced the U.S. Navy to officially acknowledge that the sunken vessel off New Jersey was indeed U-869. And just like that, history had to make room for a new truth. U-869 had not been destroyed near Gibraltar as once believed. It had met its end off the American East Coast, 3,000 miles from its last recorded mission. This wasn't a correction. It was a rewrite of wartime history, and it came not from governments or military historians, but from a group of everyday people driven by a relentless need to know. Imagine what would have remained buried if they hadn't cared. If they hadn't listened to the pull of a mystery no one else thought to question. But while the identification was confirmed, the question of why the U-boat ended up there remained suspended in eerie silence. Was it a miscommunication? A secret mission? Or something more tragic, more random? All the men aboard U-869 perished with her. No one left to tell the tale. What's even more haunting is that no one had ever even thought to look for her there. It was as though history had quietly sealed the fate of U-869 in a folder marked unknown, and only by pure stubborn persistence was the truth ever unearthed. This wasn't just a shipwreck. It was a grave, and yet it still wasn't done speaking. Then came a chilling twist. The story wasn't over. It had just begun. Once the submarine's identity was revealed, a deeper question emerged. What exactly had brought it down? That's when competing theories began to swirl like the currents around the wreck. Was U-869 destroyed by its own hand, or by the unseen strike of enemy ships? One possibility was the infamous Circle Runner, a malfunctioning torpedo that curved in a deadly arc, a steel predator turning against its master. It wasn't science fiction. It had happened before. German torpedoes during the war were notoriously temperamental, and a few had turned into circular death traps. This malfunction could easily have sealed the fate of U-869. Supporters of this theory pointed to internal damage consistent with a torpedo explosion from within, not a strike from outside, but a catastrophic failure that gave the crew no chance. But then there's the second theory, rooted in official wartime reports, that U-869 was identified and sunk by two U.S. Navy vessels, the USS Howard D. Crowe and USS Coiner, during a coordinated depth charge attack in February 1945. On paper, it makes sense. The Navy had recorded an engagement with a submarine in the same general area. They dropped explosives, observed bubbles and oil slicks, and recorded a kill. The records later credited this encounter as the destruction of an unidentified German sub, presumed to be U-869, and for decades, that explanation stood unchallenged. Yet, as is often the case, the facts refused to neatly align. For one, the wreck's exact location didn't match the reported coordinates of the attack. It was close, but not exact. A subtle discrepancy, perhaps, but in the world of naval warfare and deep-sea forensics, even a few miles can matter. Then there's the issue of the wreck itself. Divers noted sealed torpedo tubes, suggesting the sub never fired a shot. There were no outward signs of combat. No scorched metal or hull breaches typical of a direct depth charge hit. Instead, the damage appeared to originate from inside the vessel. The front compartments were imploded inward, as if something had detonated from within. The torpedo room, hauntingly intact, whispered of a sudden end, one that came before any countermeasure could be taken. One diver described the wreck as frozen in time. No signs of escape, no evidence that the crew even attempted to surface. It was as though whatever happened in the blink of an eye, leaving no room for panic, let alone survival. That kind of silence echoes louder than any explosion. And then comes the wild card, the idea that U-869 was on a mission no one knew about. A secret assignment, never logged, never declassified. A mission that would explain everything: the location, the lack of communication, the sudden disappearance from known charts. Could U-869 have been operating under clandestine orders, drifting silently toward an unknown objective when disaster struck? The truth remains elusive, tangled in ocean currents and fractured steel. All we know is that this submarine, long forgotten and dismissed as a wartime statistic, had a story that refused to stay buried. It took a handful of determined divers to pull it back into the light, to challenge decades of accepted truth. And now, as the waves roll back over U-869, we're left with a puzzle that's only half solved. The wreck speaks, but in riddles. And maybe, just maybe, the answers still lie waiting, rusting in the cold silence beneath the sea. No one could have predicted how a sunken vessel from World War II would end up shedding light on a mystery that not only challenged historical records, but exposed a chilling secret buried deep beneath the ocean for nearly 8 decades. The U-869 wasn't just another war casualty. It was a story frozen in time, hiding truths no one was ready to face. Even now, its silence screams louder than any cannon fire. What if this submarine wasn't simply on patrol? What if it had another, more covert objective? When divers finally breached a sealed compartment in late 2024, equipped with advanced gear and patience honed from years of obsession, they cracked open a forgotten tomb that would unravel decades of speculation. Inside that long, inaccessible chamber, the air was heavy with the weight of untouched memories. The rusting metal, the eerily preserved crates, and rubber-sealed lockers still holding against time's relentless assault made one thing clear. This space had remained untouched since the very moment U-869 hit the seabed in 1945. And what emerged from it? Far more than just uniforms or rusted utensils. Historians and intelligence experts were left stunned when divers found a ceremonial dagger etched with a naval motto reserved for elite forces, and a Kriegsmarine uniform, still bearing the Iron Eagle and insignia, so intact it seemed impossible. Then, hidden beneath oilcloth wraps and sealed crates, they discovered something far more chilling: a Nazi flag in pristine condition, and propaganda leaflets printed in English, clearly meant for American shores. This wasn't just a war story. It was a covert operation lost to history. Could U-869 have been on a secret mission to deliver operatives or stir dissent inside the U.S.? The idea sounded like fiction until the evidence pointed otherwise. These revelations were never made public, buried beneath layers of red tape, political discomfort, and quiet panic. If this Nazi submarine had been trying to infiltrate American soil, even in the final days of the war, it rewrites everything we thought we knew about Germany's Atlantic operations. This was no routine patrol gone wrong. It was a silent threat aimed at the heart of America, and we almost never knew. But the story doesn't end in the dark waters off New Jersey. One name surfaced: Herbert Gashowski, the only crewman originally assigned to U-869 who survived. Not because of a heroic escape, but because fate intervened. Illness kept him from boarding the doomed vessel, and his place was given to another. What seemed like a trivial reassignment at the time became the sole reason he lived. For decades, Herbert believed what everyone else did, that U-869 had sunk near Gibraltar. It wasn't until American divers unearthed the wreck and reached out to surviving relatives that the truth surfaced. When they contacted Herbert in Germany, he was decades removed from the war, but not from its memory. He'd trained with those men, laughed with them, prepared for a mission he never completed. Seeing photos of the wreckage and personal items, like a knife engraved with his friend Georg Horenberg's name, shattered what he believed for 50 years. The submarine hadn't gone down near Spain. It had died in silence just miles from American shores. Herbert was subdued, humbled by the truth. He didn't seek headlines or praise. He only offered what he remembered, helping confirm the identities of the fallen, and providing first-hand insight into the final days before deployment. Herbert died in 2005, never knowing the chamber would one day be opened. Or maybe he did, and chose silence over revelation. The tragedy of U-869 holds an eerie parallel to many of Hollywood's most guarded secrets, and one recent celebrity story reflects that same haunting depth. Just like U-869's sealed compartment, this star's final chapter revealed a vault of untold truths. Fans were shocked when private investigators uncovered financial documents and handwritten letters from a major actor, long believed to have left the spotlight by choice, hinting that behind the curtain, he had been battling something far darker. The documents suggest he had been financially supporting multiple people under pseudonyms, funneling funds to protect identities and shield personal failures from public view. It's a pattern we've seen across Hollywood before: reputation above reality, secrecy above self. In the world of fame, fortune can be both a spotlight and a shadow. This late star once lived a life dripping in opulence. From his jaw-dropping fleet of exotic cars, Bentleys, Ferraris, and a vintage Rolls-Royce he had shipped from Europe, to his collection of Patek Philippe and Audemars Piguet watches, everything screamed success. His primary residence was a $12 million Beverly Hills estate, complete with a subterranean theater, tennis court, and panoramic city views. He traveled in a Gulfstream G650 and invested in multiple tech startups, one of which sold to a major conglomerate for over $300 million. Alongside acting, he had stake in a luxury wellness brand, co-founded a high-end tequila line, and even purchased insurance covering not just his real estate and fleet, but his hands and voice, his most valuable assets. These weren't vanity moves. They were part of a calculated financial empire. But behind the numbers was a man who understood risk, both on and off screen. His life offered some priceless financial wisdom. Diversify early, protect what can't be replaced, and never let success cloud transparency. While some celebrities burned through fortunes chasing fleeting status, he built layers of protection around every deal. Yet even with all this planning, the emotional toll of hiding personal truths ultimately weighed more than any luxury could offset. As the dust settles on both this Hollywood tale and the rediscovered secrets of U-869, one message echoes through time. No matter how deep you bury the past, truth finds its way back to the surface. Whether through ocean currents or forgotten bank ledgers, secrets don't stay hidden forever, and when they do rise, they remind us how fragile the line is between what's remembered and what's lost. What else lies beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered? Sometimes the quietest places hold the loudest echoes, and that's the jaw-dropping story behind what salvage divers pulled from the depths. A Nazi submarine frozen in time, filled with secrets, symbols, and unanswered questions. From hidden compartments to preserved codebooks, it's a discovery that flips history on its head. If this blew your mind, go ahead and hit that like button, drop your theories in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. We've got even more untold stories and wild discoveries coming your way. You won't want to miss what's next. After all, history isn't always buried. Sometimes it's just waiting to resurface. Until then, keep your eyes open, your curiosity sharp, and remember, even the deepest secrets eventually rise to the surface. See you in the next dive.